thank you, Erica. Thank you for giving a stage to us. And well, every time people ask me what is regenerative farming, what is regenerative agriculture, and then I try to dumb it down, and I just tell people, well, it means there's no pesticides, herbicides, fungicide, and trying to reduce farmers' suicide rate, right? So we're trying to eliminate all the sides, and that's what regenerative farming is. And then we put ourselves into the nature and trying to see what we can do and be a participant rather than a dictator, and to work with every other species and to steward the land and restore the dynamic of our water cycle and carbon cycle. That's the main function, like as a regenerative farmer myself, which is a buzz term, but really we're rooted in a lot of this indigenous culture, indigenous knowledge, indigenous ways of doing things. And that resonate with myself as a, kind of from the old culture. I'm a Chinese, and so everything I'm looking at, from the growing food to eating food and diet, everything is looking traced back to 6,000 or 8,000 years ago, right? So, and the resonance, that's one thing is very important to me. And another term I always like to say is harmony. How can we be in harmony with nature, and in harmony with, in sync with everything surround us, and be able to and build all these health part of the journey for the land and people. Erica, do I have those slides at all? Yeah. So yes, please. So I kind of yesterday I sent the slides to Erica, and then she said, "Are you sure you're sending the right slides to me? Because this is about physics and everything." I was like, "Yes, absolutely." And I want to set up the context, because what the work Molly does, and then we collaborate, is there's a lot of things that is the foundation that we forgot, just like the culture and value we forgot. So I want to hone everybody's mindset into this, and then be able to kind of think about this and think through using the next 5 to 10 minutes, and then so we can have a good discussion on what does that mean for us in terms of health for people and health for land. And if you could. If we can go to the next slide. So the last slide, when I talk about harmony, is how do we in sync with everything? When we're putting two different perspectives, different frequency together, nothing would happen. But when you put everything into the context, and then things can happen in a harmonic way, right? And so this is, in life, you guys probably in one way or the other, either in school or other places, you guys seen this spectrum, right? And it's everywhere. And the visible light down there, right? That's where the human sense, where we are, which as a species, that's our frequency we're most sensitive for. Whereas for other species, they're gonna shift, right? For bat, that's where we got the radio waves, and that's come from, and that's where their frequency is. And for a rat, that's gonna be shifted on different side. And when we shift that frequency, how we in sync with the nature, what we can see or observe, and the energy change, right? For human, we require a lot of energy, because we're a big body mass, and then we're gonna be using more energy, and then trying to consume things, digest things. And then we're gonna digest and consume things in a chemistry perspective, amino acid, protein, very differently than a rat does, than the insect does. Right? So this is very important on the modern day agriculture, what we've done versus the way that when we're looking at the nature, how we designed to do. And that's a discrepancy right there. If we can go to the next slide. There's two examples I want to give. Number one is nitrogen. And in the industry agriculture right now, what we do is we need the fertilizer, which is nitrogen. And that is the nitrate, is the most oxidative state of nitrogen on the entire nitrogen profile. And it has to go through all these different layers once you pump the nitrogen into the soil to support plant and convert that into organic nitrogen in order to make plants grow. Look at the journey of that, how much energy is taking for the plant to grow, right? It's a lot of steps, but the plant by itself, it cannot generate that much energy through the photosynthesis. So that's a lot of time why for the modern day food, what we have in the end, those components, the chemistry break down into water and sugar. And that's where what caused the autoimmune system dysfunction in human body, because everything we're consuming is sugar. Wheat causing people have gluten intolerance, causing people have more diabetes, and broccoli, right, in the system that grow, that breakdown has no phytochemicals in there. That's supposed to be one of the healthiest food for us. But because of the way we're growing, we're actually eliminate all those benefits. And for plants and human comparison, the metabolics. For plants, primary metabolic, meaning is building sugar, amino acid, protein. And then if there's excess energy, it will convert some of the micronutrient into the system that is soluble, and in the end is gonna be good for the animal, good for people. And then if there's more excess energy left, then it will start building that secondary metabolism and be able to create that defense system to the insects, to the fungals, to all these environmental disasters, even hail, right? So when you use nitrate in there, consume most of the energy for that primary metabolics, the plants no longer have that self-defense system. That's why we have to add all these herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides. So if you think this negative feedback loop, the industry is designed to give you a product that you not only rely on that product alone, you have to rely on everything else. It's a negative feedback loop. Like that, our farm, first of all, we cut this one. And now I'm building essential amino acid in soil. And those essential amino acid is within this spectrum range that once we digest, and we're gonna absorb all those, right? And then secondarily, those things in here, the insects can no longer sense. The fungal, the diseases can no longer attack because they're in a lower energy profile that is outside this range. Then we no longer need pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. That's why we're achieving this chemical-free environment. And animals loves it, and I love it. And my wife say one thing is, you don't have to tell me what kind of flour you use, like for these two different loaves. I can tell you which one is yours, which one is not yours. Because she feel much better, there's no bloating after digesting our wheat versus even we buy sometimes King Arthur, right? It doesn't work for her because that traceability, because the way we grow. So that's kind of, I want to hone in on that concept and just kind of open up, like for people to think about, what do we mean by health? What do we mean by growing food? And why physics, chemistry, and biology, all these all intersect, connect together. Another way is, why are we even going to school and learning all these things, and we've even never talked about things like these, right? Is that education system we're within really helping us promoting what we should understand? And how should we steward the land? How should we steward our gut health to our human health? And that's one of the most important parts through our work. not just on the land, but also how can we translate that into food as medicine and to be able to help people to have healthy diet and a healthy concept through the life. And I'm gonna give to Molly because the way she does crafted all this bread to me is amazing because it tastes different than the ones we buy from the market. And it also looks different than the ones we buy on the market. And then how she does is just incredible. And I just can't appreciate enough for like somebody like her or others, culinary creators, to provide a space for farmers to bring the right product to the consumers.
Thanks, Yadi. I don't know if I need this, but I'll hold it. My name is Molly Carney. I'm the owner and baker of Dirt Lady Bread. We are an artisanal cottage bakery here in Tucson, focusing on naturally leavened, wild fermented, yeasted breads. We use, is this better? Wonderful, yeah. Okay, so we only use organic cold stone milk bread, flour, fermented water, filtered yeast, and Redmond real salt from Utah. So we start from the basics, very, very clean, simple ingredients. And we take it further by the type of flour that we use, which I'm gonna get into. The first thing to go off of what Yadi said, we have this totally broken agricultural system, and wheat is a really great example of it. When we're making bread, we can take it a step further to talk about how the system is a little bit wacky. We've got the blank soil, okay, so then we're having to pump in herbicides, pesticides. And then we have a genetically modified crop that in and of itself can't necessarily produce a nutritious food. So then it's harvested and it goes to the mill. Traditional milling is very hot, high, fast temperatures. So there are 3 parts of the wheat. And when you mill them that fast and that hot, they're totally stripped of their nutritional value. So you have a crop that's already semi-blank, and then the milling process does worse to it. Because then the food is so nutritionally void, enrichments are added, vitamins, niacin. So now we've got this flour that's pumped full of glyphosate, niacin, enriched minerals and vitamins, and then it is baked without any pre-fermentation. So a ton of yeast, really fast, quick process. Of course, when you ingest it, it's going to like inflame your entire system. You get bloating, mental fog. I mean, the list goes on and on for gluten. And that's why we have such a gluten intolerance right now. Our culture, wheat is one of the most widely consumed foods across the world. And it's such an important and celebratory part of our diets. It's so fun to eat. It's so important to us, right, culturally. And now there's, the perception has totally changed where it's more of a demonic food, where it's causing all of these negative health outcomes. So when we fix our wheat and flour system, right, we have healthy soils, we have an heirloom or heritage crop that's able to actually take up the nutrients and is well adapted for the environment. When I first started speaking with Yadi, he told me how much water was actually used for an entire crop of white Sonora wheat, and my mind was totally blown because he can irrigate an entire round with minimal water compared to farming, across the world, and that's really what's important for our region. So healthy soil, an heirloom crop variety, and then cold stone milling, so it's retaining all 3 parts of the wheat when it becomes milled. Then with heritage baking practices, sourdough, long fermentation, you're collecting wild yeast from your environment or adding a little bit of baker's yeast and fermenting that. When the pre-fermentation happens, right, that's when the pre-digestion within the bread starts happening before it gets to your body. So it's breaking down fructans and phytic acids, the carbohydrates, the things that are often misdiagnosed as a gluten intolerance. And then with the pre-fermentation, also you have an increase of vitamin and mineral absorption from a healthy plant. It slows and stabilizes the glycemic spikes and index essentially when you're eating the bread. So your blood sugar remains more stable, your gut microbiome is happy, It tastes so good. It really is a beautiful process when it's done in the correct and heritage way. So Yadi being a regenerative farmer and me fully believing in regenerative practices, how can we regenerate our diets and our food systems so that we're using slow foods, heritage crops, long fermented products, and using intuitive eating. So checking in on how we feel after we eat these things, right? Like Yadi's wife. When you eat something that was made with love from every step and right practices and backed by science and traditional ecological knowledge, this, long knowing of the past, your body knows it. And that's how we can begin to take steps forward to regenerating our diet. The loaves that I made today are in a baker's percentage. You have 100%. And so they're about, 10% of the mesquite flour from Oatman Farms. And then they're equal parts, 45% of white Sonora wheat and Bluebeard, both at type 85 extraction. So it's the type of extraction rate with the milling. So what you're eating is a totally 100% local, regenerative, certified organic loaf of bread, and it tastes so good. You can pick up the nutty aroma of the white Sonora and the mesquite. You can smell the difference. Texturally, it's different. The crust is really strange. All of these things. And so when we're thinking about heritage foods, I think perception is another key point to hit on, right? Perception of the health of it and how it's actually helping our bodies and our communities, and then also the aesthetic of the bread and of heritage foods. They might look different. It's probably not going to be a big, beautiful crumb or the crust that you were looking for or a perfect looking fruit. They're going to be a little bit different, and that's okay, and we should celebrate that, and it's really exciting to me. So that's what I wanted to speak on.
I'd like to open it up to questions if that's okay.
Wonderful.
I feel like there are a lot of questions. I mean, I know I have.
I noticed in one of the slides you had several different varieties of flour. Could you expound on what each one is and the differences in baking flours?
Well, the question is, we grow different variety of flour, right, and of wheat, and so currently we grow 4 different variety of wheat, and 3 heirloom variety, 1 modern variety bred by Stephen Jones in Washington State University, bred for baking purposes, right? So the wheat we have white Sonora wheat, which has been grown here for more than 300 years. Pedro Quino brought in through his journey, and Bluebeard durum is a durum wheat, which is the only type of one of the only type of heirloom durum that originated from the Fertile Crust, and then similar as the desert durum that we grow here in Arizona and then sent to Italy and then manufacture for pasta and then send it back. We buy from the grocery store. That is the desert durum, which is a modern variety. And Bluebeard durum is very different in that sense. I'll get into that a little bit, but it's good for pizza or pasta, right? That durum wheat. And white Sonora wheat is a soft white, is people like to say in the modern day of the culinary creation, I would say people like to say that as a pastry.
It's a pastry
flour, but
makes great tortillas.
Yeah, and you can tell it make good bread too in some degree if you do that right. And the Red 5, which is a New World heirloom variety, landrace variety from, kind of from Canada area, and then Wisconsin was the first place in the United States growing that. And then we adopted here in the Southwest. It does well. So that's what I think Barrel Bread Danguera used a little bit of the Red 5 into his recipe, right? And then the Skagit 1109, which is bred by the lab, Dr. Stephen Jones and from Skagit Valley, and that is a hard red. It's good for pizza and modern day rustic bread, and that's the purpose for those. Now, one thing I do want to kind of say is I kind of give that in sequence is actually how much water is being used from the least to the most. And on average, so by growing wheat, all four variety on average, we conserve about 350 million gallons of water every year compared to if we did grow alfalfa. 350 million gallons, right? Each pound of the grain is about 700 gallons of water conservation. And white Sonora conserve the most. It's a strange thing that white Sonora can irrigate 3 times versus other variety of wheat 4 to 5 times to be able to seed and harvest. And was 2 summer ago, we had axis seed drop on the ground, and I grow summer cover crop. And so white Sonora popped back in summer, 1 round of irrigation and seeded in summer. That is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life about wheat, because wheat is only growing in winter. But you have a wheat that can sprout in summer, and then you can even harvest that. And that kind of get me back into the rabbit hole and then trying to figure out why is that. And because the climate adaptation of all different plants is because of their genetic expression. And that's where I dive into and learn about these is the pairs of chromosomes in wheat. For the heirloom wheat, in general, have 14 to 18 pairs of chromosomes. And human has 23 pairs of chromosomes. Whereas modern wheat has up to 44 pairs of chromosomes. In biology, and just dumb it down as less is more in this case. When you have less pair of chromosomes, and so essentially all the genes within each of these pairs, and then they have multiple functions. And so they can express more from the genetic side and be able to adapt into the climatic condition, less like water stress or hot environment or the soil biology change, all those things. And that's why white Sonora wheat has been long-standing. Every single year, I've seen good results from it. And then I haven't measured it, but I think if I measure it in the biochemistry, they're probably all showing different signals and signs on that, because every year looks different, right? The climate is different, the temperature is different, rainfall amount is different. Now, whereas the modern variety of the wheat that is very sophisticated to breed those and have up to 44 pairs of chromosomes, and one single reason they breed those is for the yield. Because wheat right now, commodity wheat is 13 cents in the market. They have to have the big volume. We have to feed the whole world. That's the mentality. But we have so much wheat in the green beans in, maybe Romania or in that eastern side of Europe, that been stored there for 7 years until they get on the market and milled flour and then get into the grocery store. So we have no traceability of when that wheat is being grown and what we get from that grocery store. So that is kind of the mentality on when we dive into growing yield versus the natural adaptation and the flour, the taste and profile and the ways we used to look at how bread's supposed to look like. And I'm sure indigenous community, they will tell a different story on how bread's supposed to look like. At least when I work with a lot of folks who use spelt, which is the ancient variety of grain, it's so dense, tastes so good that the modern day bread, we don't used to taste those kind of flavor profile. Otherwise it's shown. So, yeah.
So I'm curious, with everything you said about how growing heritage grains has far less water use than the modern wheat. Are you seeing more farmers adopting it with the increased awareness of, the struggles to farm in this climate?
Yeah. That's a great question. I wish I could invite, a line of chefs and bakers here to talk about this, but the reality is only few are, in the industry are actually trying to use this flour because I think it's the market access. Is how one thing when I moved to the US, I have to adjust in this. It's a learning curve for me is when I go to a restaurant, go to some places with friends and eat, and then most of people tell me, yeah, I don't like that texture, right? So, and I think the bread is the same thing. If we're looking at the texture in the marketplace, what bread's supposed to look like, and versus what most of the time Molly baked, and they're very different. I think that probably scare people away to trying new things, so then scare the chef away or bakers away to not using a lot. But
And farmers.
yeah, where the farmers, if there's no market, and then farmers probably won't grow because farming is about cash flow. Is if you can't sell your product like that, and most of the people won't be able to get into that deal. But we did help our neighbor farm who do our custom harvesting, and after 44 years conventional farming, and he opened his first organic farm and growing up to 1,000 acres of the organic product right now, which I think is a win in that case. Do we need more? Absolutely. Do we need people grow things not just for the yield and profit and cash flow and trying to take care of the soil? Yes, absolutely. I think it's still at the infancy where we see that, and the consumers, where we think, I think Molly probably can speak on that too, is ultimately consumers have the purchasing power to be able to radically help change the food system. And it's not going to be from global or national scale, it has to be from the local, hyper-local conversion. And if people support Molly and make her be successful, and then she can be able to get more flour and then support farmers to do more, and then we get that free will effect.
I just want to add something.
Yeah.
Just to add, I always like to say that, of course, this conversation is situated in access, and that regenerative foods are at a much higher price barrier. So not only, and right, that's a part of the paradigm shift of transitioning to regenerative foods. We've seen that as organics have become more popular, the price point has become more accessible, and there's larger and broader access. Geographically, as well as in, learning, education. So with heritage foods and regenerative foods, the same thing too. If you have the funds to participate, please do. That's the thing, please do. And if you don't, let's educate ourselves and each other and share. I get part of my wheat from Oatman Farms, and I'm working on building, little secret, on building a regenerative organic CSA share where people who are able to buy into the higher price point receive 100% Oatman loaf, and they can also buy shares for other people in the community. The other part of my flour comes from Washington State, of another farm, Karen Springs Mill. And while they're not regenerative, they are certified organic with the cold stone milling, and they prioritize single origin farms, family farms, all organic practices. But I'm working on transitioning more and more. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
This one's for both of you, but can you scale up to deal with like restaurants and food service and pack them in the types of sizes that they need?
This question is, can we scale up? Yadi, you want to go first?
Well, what I can tell you is we just kind of scratched the surface on this, and right now we collaborate with Chompies and making pretzel slider bun and sourdough bread, and and we're trying to develop some other recipes. And I haven't had a lot of Tucson restaurant, and be craving for those. And most of the restaurant and schools are in Phoenix. I was a little bummed, right? Because being the city of gastronomy, and then we have that cultural sensitivity for so much. And then when it comes to the pricing, the food, and then we're kind of skipping that, right? But we do collaborate with Arizona Wilderness Brewery, and we can supply a lot of more flour. In this case, flour, I think, grow row crop is easier to get to a lot of them, but what the market access is, and then who is willing to purchase those, has become the barrier for us to say, well, should we scale back to grow less? That's where our problem is. We can grow up to 380 acres of the wheat, but we choose not to because there's ecological services, so the stewardship to the land. We have sheep grazing. That's the main source of fertilizer, and then we're trying to add chicken egg layers, go scratch the sheep poop, and then get all the larvae of the flies, and then get additional poop in there, and to fertilizing the land and be able to restore that ecosystem. So that's kind of our practices. We always trying to ask ourselves, okay, if we grow this number of acres of row crop, do we have enough land that is being rested, good for the animal, and also good for return the ecosystem that's supposed to be, rather than just chasing always for that highest yield amount and profitability, and then just because of the marketplace is right there. So it's a mixed conversation, mixed strategy right there, I would say.
The answer though is yes, you could, if there was a demand for it.
And also that will allow a lot of other farmers to, during this transition, to say, well, yeah, we want to grow wheat because there is a market right now. Let's do it together. Then we can talk about, okay, we can have a cooperative, cold stone mill here in Arizona, because right now we mill in Barton Spring Mills in Texas. That's the closest one to us. We don't have access to cold stone mill. And think about logistic carbon footprint, and also talking about we have the local food business, and then be able to have people to go visit each stop and to see that traceability and transparency. We're yet there at this point. So, but.
Yadi, are your breads packaged in Texas as well then? The bread mixes?
Those bread mixes. Yeah, so, wow, that's a long-winded one. We mill our flour in Texas, co-pack in LA, and fulfill from Northern California, right? That's just because the system's set up. And we just started wanting to work with the co-packer here in Phoenix, but the price of that co-packing is more than double. So we already have a thin margin, because like all we do right here is our product is expensive, but we really don't make a lot. We just trying to, okay, we can reinvest in the land and then continue doing the right thing. And being profitable is not in, at this point, we can't put that in our equation yet. And just want to make sure, like, okay, grow the cash flow, and then don't lose too much. That's where we are.
And how about for your side, can you scale up your baking efforts to produce more for restaurants?
Yes, we can scale up, and we're working on getting a new oven and building a strong and steady, consistent customer base. We don't have any massive dreams of being in supermarkets. We are very interested in connecting deeply with our community and having people who are willing to reinvest their money in the local food economy. And also, I'm very interested in education and home bakers, and anyone who's doing this is my ally. So spreading awareness is growing.
Great question. I can talk about.
Yeah.
So, Donnie, you have a PhD chemistry that I'm right as you were
I'm a chemistry student at the university. And I just wanted to ask, with your science background, what got you into farming?
Oh boy, that's a rough one. Well, I'm married to my wife, who is from a family farm. Her family her dad was a sixth generation farmer, and that's kind of my introduction to farming. And from I had a chemical engineer background, and that's, as an engineer, when you see that large equipment and hydraulic hoses like your neck size, and it's like, hell yeah, this is good. That's kind of my impression to really to the farming at the very beginning is from the industry side. And and then my PhD was in soil water science and airland watershed management, and I'm looking at the large ecosystem scale of the how everything worked together. So when 2016, he passed away, but he taught me so much how to build community and how to care about family and care about land. That's kind of motivated me to say, well, I guess somebody got to continue that legacy. And that's what made me have that commitment after graduating and trying to step my foot into farming industry. I didn't know if I could be a farmer or not. An opportunity really just popped up, and I met the farm owner, and then he said, yeah, I want to do regenerative agriculture, which I had no idea what does that mean at that point. But did some research. It's like, yeah, this is kind of what I like to do. This is essentially to build watershed and watershed management on large scale. And I always say, let's make the farm be the bridge of the ecosystem rather than the brick of the ecosystem. And that's where all those passion coming in. And I'm a biogeochemist by training, and soil water chemistry is my gig. But now I talk more about biology than chemistry, and start getting to dive deep into the physics side, because I think the biology and physics, biophysics side is really have a big potential for completely change our mindset on how things work in this universe, on this planet. And we're standing here because of gravity, right? So that's one of the biggest physical components that we can't ignore.
So I have a real quick question that I think that involves you. Gary Nathan, just I guess about a year ago, received a huge grant. Are you guys part of that? It's a sustainable farming fund.
Yeah, it was it's the Climate Smart Commodity Grant, and he wrote, well, speaking of the federal grant, it's very sophisticated, and we hope we'll be involved and then be some parts and then contribute knowledge in some way. But again, I think they just announced 2 Thursdays ago, and they're still in the process of trying to figure it out who are the participants, who are the partners in that program. So that's kind of where they are in that process.
So I just wanted to close it out with like a final question for folks who want to support your businesses and your products. Molly, where can folks find and get your brand?
You can find us at the Oro Valley Farmers Market at Steam Pump Ranch on Saturdays, 9 to 1. The Green Valley Farmers Market on Wednesdays off of Esperanza, 9 to 1. We do a weekly, call it bread drop, where you can come pick up a loaf that you pre-order through a Google form online in Armory Park. So that's our downtown Tucson pickup. Hopefully in December, we'll be at Rito Farmers Market, 9 to 1. And connect with us on social media at Dirt Lady Bread on Instagram and dirtladybread.com to get our newsletter and see our calendar, see what we're up to. Thank you.
Same question. Where can folks find Oatman Farms products?
It's just oatmanfarms.com.
And we have our baking mixes. So we have our flour that cold milled with Barton spring mill. Essentially, you send the order there, they will get your order, mill fresh, and then send it to you. And that's kind of going the old ways of how flour is supposed to be produced. And we're also getting ready to launch a vanilla extract product, which is super clean with organic vanilla from Madagascar, dipped into ethanol produced with one single ingredient from our wheat and distilled water. That's how clean we want to make things be for everybody. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much.